is getting hit pretty hard. It's getting hit hard with reviews. We'll see what the audience scores end up being, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. And I think it's going to get hit hard at the box office as well. And it really never really stood a chance coming after Morbius and Madam Web. I mean, Sony has really salted the box office earth and just, the pop culture earth for their Spider-Man-less movies with those two movies. Venom did a little bit of damage control, but it seems not enough. Well, but again, we'll see. We'll see what actually happens. But I think there's a lot to like here, and I'm not ashamed of it. I think I particularly appreciate it as a comic book fan, although I do suspect some casuals might enjoy the film as well. But anyway, this is my spoiler review, so let's dig in and talk about what I liked about the film. And I'll be curious to hear your own spoilerific thoughts down below. Now, yeah, it is a bummer that this shot isn't in the movie. Why isn't it in the movie? Even like over the credits, man. But I was enjoying the film so much that it didn't really bother me that he didn't get his classic Kraven look and sit in like the throne until the very end of the film. From a business standpoint, I'd probably have asked the team here to move that up to the end of the second act. I'd be like, let him be Kraven for the third act. Let him be Kraven. But what are you going to do? They made the movie. When I was doing my non-spoiler review, though, it occurred to me that just like everyone in the film here is associated with an animal, Russell Crowe is the lion. Brilliant metaphor. So now, because this is the spoiler review, we can really dig into it. You wouldn't think a movie like Kraven would be well written, but I gotta tell you, I hope you at least see where I'm coming from by the end of the spoiler review, but I think it's constructed quite well. So, Russell Crowe, his character hunts the lion. The lion, though, ends up being who helps make Kraven, who he becomes, the superpowered being. But Kraven's father also helps to shape Kraven. So they both do, these two lions. And just as Kraven's father says you need to kill a legend to become a legend, this is like a legendary lion on the savannah, ultimately when Kraven learns it was his father who was behind his brother's kidnapping to manipulate Kraven, well, he manipulated the Rhino. Kraven's father manipulated the Rhino. He tipped him off that Kraven was the hunter. So that his brother would be kidnapped and that Kraven would take out the Rhino for Kraven's father. That was Kraven's father's endgame, to take out the Rhino. It was a long play, and he hoped maybe he'd bring his son into the fold as well. And he said, you risked Dimitri's life. And Russell Crowe said, but, to be fair, I knew you'd never let anything bad happen to your brother. And I was like, he's got you there. But anyway, so Kraven, during a hunting accident, kills his father. I thought it was very poetic that he killed him by a bear attacked Kraven's father as Kraven left the campsite, but Kraven had removed all the shells, all the bullets from his father's guns. And earlier in the movie, he tells his younger brother when they're teenagers that his father is not really it's not a fair fight of his father up against these animals. Because he has a weapon. And I think so that was interesting that's how he set it up at the end. I was like, good callback. But anyway, he killed his father. He killed his father just like his father killed the lion. It was like generational. And I thought that was very interesting. I don't even think, his father obviously, was not happy about that outcome. But I think in the grand scheme of things, I think that Kraven fulfilled Russell Crowe's prophecy. He, in many ways, became the lion himself. He became his father. And on that note, after he died, Russell Crowe left Kraven the iconic vest. He'd had it made for his son from the mane of that original lion, which had caused them so much problems for them, because not only had it made Kraven who he was, but when Kraven's father killed the lion, because, he threatened his son and he almost killed him, Kraven was very upset because he'd come to love animals, and that's what made him run away from home. But I guess he wasn't so upset that he wasn't willing to pass up an awesome a vest once it was made for him. So Kraven wears the lion. He, in many ways, wears his father. He wears his kill, like so many hunters do. And I think thematically, that's really strong. All right, so they use the hunter metaphor really well throughout the film, not just having Kraven hunting human predators, but he would often impale their bodies up on the wall, just like human hunters do with their animal trophies. I was like, that is very effective. Now, another metaphor that I really liked was Fred Heckinger as the chameleon. Heckinger, let's just say he has a really unique physicality. I wondered if they paid to tweak him a little bit in post. And I don't know if they did, but they really played it up here. I thought it was interesting. And I think when you combine his unique physicality with him being so much smaller than Aaron Taylor Johnson, he really did seem like a lizard. Often sometimes in this movie, it seemed like a parable, when, those old parables with parables where the animals are interacting. And it really did seem like the lion and the lizard. And so I thought that was really interesting because, of course, the chameleon is the lizard. Now, the movie starts off with Dimitri just being uncannily good at imitating voices. Who are we kidding? We know it's just a voiceover from the original actor. But anyway, and that leads to him opening a nightclub when he gets older, where he does really good covers of famous songs because he can sound like anybody. But then when the Rhino kidnaps him, the Rhino feels a camaraderie with Dimitri. Not only because the Rhino actually, they didn't need this, but the Rhino happened to be on that safari in the origin story. But anyway, the Rhino feels that he and Dimitri are both the runts of the litter, and also he wants Dimitri to help him defeat Dimitri's father and brother. But anyway, he lets him in on a little secret as to how he became the Rhino. And it turns out he became the Rhino by traveling to New York City to see a doctor by the name of Miles Warren. What a fantastic deep cut. Because Miles Warren is the doctor behind the famous Clone Saga in the Spider-Man comics. So that was really good. I don't believe he was behind either the Rhino or the Chameleon in the comics, but that was a really good way to tie everything in. I thought for a minute they were going to see Dr. Kirk Connors, but that's been overdone. So I thought Miles Warren was a great idea. We never see Miles Warren, though. There's so much great stuff for a potential sequel. All right, so at the very end of the movie, 1 year later, which is not only also a famous Spider-Man story, but of course goes from birthday to birthday. Kraven visits his brother Dimitri every year on his birthday. So the Rhino and Kraven's father have been killed by Kraven. So Kraven once again goes to visit Dimitri, and he feels this is going to be great because there's no more problems for us. But he discovers that his weak brother has decided to take over both their father and the Rhino's operations because they were available. But not only that, but he went to see Dr. Miles Warren. And so as Kraven stops his brother on the famous Millennial Bridge, which we've seen in so many movies, his brother turns around and looks just like Kraven. But not just like Kraven, a mini Kraven, because he's smaller. He can't change his size, which I thought was a really great choice. So it's like this little lizard, this little chameleon, still looking up at the great big lion. And I loved his line. He said, "If only you could see your face." And he was seeing his face. I just thought that was really good. And then as Dimitri turns back away, as he changes back into his old face, his usual face, we very briefly get a look at what is his new face. And it looks just like the comics, but also a little lizard-like. And so I just thought that was fabulous. I was captivated by it. So even though there's no end credit scene, that's the setup for the sequel, that Dimitri challenges his brother to try and stop him. I've heard rumblings of an end credit scene, but I didn't see one in my screening. I was at the premiere of the movie. I don't think they would cut it out there. But anyway. So also like the comics, Calypso has strong ties to voodoo. And I liked the origin story, where as teenagers, both her family and Kraven's family were both in Africa for that fateful accident that Kraven has. So the big lion that Kraven's father has been hunting all this time, he confronts Kraven, but Kraven refuses to shoot him. And they have a moment. I see you, you see me. But it's ruined when Kraven's father shoots the lion. I mean, not only because he's wanted to kill it all these years, but also because he's worried about his sons. So the lion gets spooked, mauls Kraven, and drags him away. But he doesn't finish the job. I mean, he kind of basically killed him. But he presents Kraven to Calypso, who's abandoned her own family safari because she feels the call of Kraven. Her grandmother predicted with tarot cards, Agatha all along, shout out, that this would happen. So she So she gives, and by the way, that special moment between Kraven and the lion, there were a lot of really great special moments with Kraven and animals throughout the film. And the internet has taught me many things. But one thing that it has taught me is that animals are a kind, interesting, funny, curious bunch, and surprisingly smart. So to see Kraven every once in a while connecting with animals not only made his, strengthened your bond with the character of Kraven. You're like, animals like him, he must be pretty good. But also it made the hunters, the humans that were killing these animals that Kraven would then go after, all the more hateful. You're like, not the water buffalo that saved Kraven's life. That was one of my favorite moments. I like that. All right, so anyway, Calypso has this elixir, this potion that her grandmother gave her that runs in their family. And she gives some to Kraven, and it not only saves his life, but it's what gives him these animal powers. And she gives him the tarot card, the final tarot card that her grandmother had given her for strength, which features a lion. And he keeps it with him all the way through being an adult. And he eventually tracks her down, and she's living in London as a high-powered attorney. And that really actually turns out to be great for Kraven, because for the few bad guys he can't track down, she helps him out so he can cross them off his list. So, I was wondering while I watched the movie, why doesn't Calypso drink some of the potion herself? Right? I mean, even though her grandmother dies, it seems she left Calypso with a pretty good amount of it. The movie kind of makes it seem that Calypso is wary of the whole thing because it turns Kraven into a killer. Like, he's, for his own sense of justice, but she's like, look what it's made you. And he's like, I think I'm pretty great. But I checked the comics, and this is comics accurate. She does enhance Kraven's powers, and her big thing is potions. She also has mind control in the comics, maybe through potions. So I think, if we ever see the character again, maybe they'll add that to her repertoire. But she uses the extra potion to save Kraven once again in the third act when the Foreigner almost kills him. See, the Foreigner is an assassin that the Rhino hires to kill Kraven because the Rhino knows that he's on Kraven's list, so he feels, I gotta get to him first. And the Foreigner is upset with Kraven because he killed his mentor or whatever. Not during the movie. All right, so the Foreigner has this MI6 serum that's been developed that paralyzes your internal organs, killing you, but not before it makes you experience your worst nightmares. And it turns out that Kraven is afraid of spiders. Oh, I thought that was great. That was a great little seed to plant for, if he ever gets to run into Spider-Man. But Calypso, at that moment when the Foreigner is distracted because he's going to deliver the kill shot, it's Calypso that delivers the kill shot with an arrow right through the Foreigner's eye. His eyes are the source of his power. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it also kills him. And then she resurrects Kraven, as she so often does in the comics. So that was comics accurate, Calypso, speaking of cards, is really Kraven's ace up his sleeve. All right, so let's talk about the Foreigner. It's interesting to me that Richard Wenk wrote the Equalizer movies because in those films, Denzel's character does a countdown as he takes down his enemies. And here, the Foreigner also he hypnotizes his opponents, but he counts to 3. I thought that was great. So what he does is he hypnotizes you and you just kind of freeze. And at that moment, it makes it seem like the Foreigner ghosts, and he turns into a ghost. He fades away. It's a little bit of an interesting, different take on how Quicksilver is often portrayed in comics with his super speed powers. But while you're in a trance, the Foreigner can very easily walk into a position where he has the upper hand, and then when he snaps you out of the trance, when he finishes his count, he kills you. And again, I just thought this was so visually interesting. Kudos to everybody who not only came up with it but was able to execute it. I found it very captivating. Christopher Abbott was so good in this role. He's supposed to he's a psycho, and I was like, I believe he's a psycho. So I liked also the juxtaposition that the Foreigner was not muscular like Kraven. He was more of an intellectual opponent, but just as formidable. So I thought that was great. Then finally, the action sequences. A little CGI at points, but I enjoyed them overall. Of course, the most egregious was the third act showdown between Kraven and the Rhino. But you know what? A ton of movies have had really bad CGI heavy final showdowns, and they've gotten the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think that should erase all the other good action sequences in the film. So I thought the opening scene at the Russian prison was a great setup for the character. It allowed the film to open with an action sequence and kind of give you some idea, but not totally give away what Kraven was capable of. And I loved Kraven's brief interactions with his prison cellmate. Oh, that was great. 3 days! And I also loved when the cellmate was like, I hate roommates. And Kraven was like, we already have that in common in Russian. And that was great. I love that. It was cool to see Kraven use the skills of different animals. He has the excellent vision of a bird, for instance, but particularly his ability to not just climb trees, but buildings and walls, similar to kind of like how an ape or a monkey would move. Very clever, and it also makes him visually unique. I thought that was great. And it made you start to think about how he would not only interact, but contrast with Spider-Man, because they're both very agile in high-rise settings. On that note, I also really liked the London car chase when they kidnap his brother and he tries to stop them. Not only did you get an even better idea of what Kraven could do, but it put him in an actual city setting. And again, it started to fill in the blanks as to how a Spider-Man sequence might play out. Oh, and a bit earlier, when he takes on those poachers who killed his water buffalo friends, so sad. The way he stopped them on his private property. Oh, that was great because they'd broken in there to poach. And great building of tension for the scene. You were like, oh, this is not going to go well for you poachers. And it did not. The way he bit off that henchman's nose and spit it at the team leader as like a show of dominance, fantastic. Now, the team leader managed to get away, but Kraven used his super, bird vision to spot the license plate. So he tracked this guy down to London, and this was a great scene. It was a great bit of writing because it was great. It was not only an entertaining scene, but it really allowed them to set up not only Kraven's MO, like, why he was doing what he was doing and how he did it, but also his signature style. It was a great scene. Very strong writing and directing. Also, the Turkish Monastery, where Kraven thought they were holding his brother, but it turns out that was actually a trap. Very clever trap, because on a hillside, they could easily watch it, and they could see the whole space, and they knew when Kraven arrived, and then they launched a rocket at it. I was like, that's actually a pretty good kill box. But I loved, this is where we saw his eyes glow in the dark. Also, the way he literally shadowed those henchmen just by walking right out of their eye line. And when they looked back, he kind of turned back. That was really nice. It was almost like a dance. I thought that was cool. And then when he almost crawled on the walls and jumped on the walls like a cat when he was taking them down. Fantastic. So I enjoyed this movie. It feels like a really solid comic book to me. Middle of the stack, as I said in my non-spoiler review. And I think a number of elements from the comics are portrayed very well here. It's not a big blockbuster. It's not a big fancy blockbuster. It's not a top of the stack kind of comic book movie. But I think it really captures what is so enjoyable about comic books, why so many of us are able to read so many of them every week, and why the medium, they can't all be bangers. But this was speaking of animals, this was a great workhorse. I had a good time. And I just really appreciated how much it respected the source material and took it seriously. And therefore, I feel by extension, takes comic book readers seriously. So I enjoyed it. I had a good time. So share your own thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.